Jeannie. Thank you so much for joining us on the live channel today. It's great to meet you.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me, Sharon.
You're so welcome, Jeannie. And what we'll just do is jump right in. How important has work been for you in your life?
I wish I could say it hasn't been that important, but it's been incredibly important. Even, growing up as a kid, my mom's answer to any problem that we had was get a job. Like basically
Oh,
in her mind, getting a job solves all of your problems. If you have sort of an idle mind that wanders too much, if you need money, like any problem. And so for me, I became very driven, when I got out of college. I didn't have a job right away. But then once I did get a job and I realized that they're going to pay me to do this work, I became
yeah.
very motivated. And I got married in my later 20s, but I just thought, well, what if I don't get married? What's the kind of lifestyle that I want to have? And at the time, I didn't have a very good job when I was young. And so then I became very motivated. And I thought, I can create a life for myself. And so work really defined me.
Mm.
And it became, as you may have heard my many TikToks, but it
Yeah.
became sort of my identity. And so, but then when I went on to retire, it was very difficult to reinvent myself.
Right, right. That's interesting. And you mentioned like your mom's answer to everything was a job, which is not bad advice. But so you had different jobs, but what you ultimately ended up doing, which whether you want to share or not doesn't matter, but was it something that you pursued or you just fell into?
That's a great question. So I was, yeah, when I was in high school, I worked. When I was in college, I worked. And then when I got out of school, it was funny. My parents were still kind of giving me money when I first got out of school. And I've said this on TikTok, but I was selling like encyclopedias and I was terrible at
Oh,
it. So this indicates how old I am because they don't exist anymore. And then my parents said, we're done. We're not going to support you anymore. You got to find your own way in life. And that's when I really took stock and thought, okay, I need a real job that has a career path. And so in some ways I would say, and I started out as a temp, I started out as a contractor and had to work my way in, but I was very focused and driven on having a career. I didn't just want a
right.
job. I was looking for a career. And actually, a former boss of mine said that's why she hired me when she asked me why I wanted this job, and I said I don't want a job, I want a career. So
Ah,
anyone can feel free to use that line.
yeah.
um, but yeah, so it wasn't necessarily that I had a vision of specifically what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to, go down the corporate path and someday end up as an executive so that I could support myself in the lifestyle that I wanted.
Cool. Yeah, that's important to have that sort of vision. That's a great tip that you want a career instead of a job, because that's a different perspective. So good one there. But is there any
And
particular advice you might give to younger people starting out and how to look at maybe building a career as opposed to just getting a job?
yeah, I would, and it's funny, as I was saying that, I thought, oh, everyone's gonna think I'm a baby boomer, but I'm not. I'm a
But
I'm solidly Gen X, although maybe I do have some boomer tendencies. I think it's okay to just want a job, right? And you don't necessarily have to have a career. That's not what I'm suggesting, but I do think you have to define for yourself what you want out of life. And so, and what sort of life or lifestyle that you want to lead, and then what are the components that support that vision you have for your life. I think it's really important to define, who you want to be in this world. Are you someone, that's trustworthy, that wants a career, that helps others, that supports others? Like, what are those traits? And then what are those actions you can take to support that person you want to be or become? And so, for me, I wanted to support myself, but and I wanted to work in a field that, financial services, you might say, is that really helping anyone? But, helping people plan and save for retirement was something I was quite passionate about. And it gave me a vision for my own retirement. Um, and so I do think
cool.
for young people, just it's not necessarily, there's no right or wrong, but it's, who do you want to be? What are your values? And then what are those actions that can support your values? I do think it can evolve and change, but I always think, at least annually kind of check in to see if your behaviors and actions are supporting the person that you want to become.
Yeah, that's good advice because you can just get too busy just meeting the bills or the responsibilities and forget about, am I actually enjoying what I'm doing or is there a little change I can make? So, yeah, that's great advice. And you mentioned helping people prepare or think about retirement. So, have you thought about retirement yourself, Jeannie? Are you planning to retire? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I did retire 2 years ago. I worked, in the corporate space for almost 30 years, and I got offered a buyout, like an early retirement, along with many other people who were at the same company. And I decided to take it because I felt over time, especially after COVID, it became a grind. It became a bit soul crushing, and I did feel like somewhere along the way, I kind of had lost who I wanted to be and become. I became such a corporate soldier, if you will,
Yeah.
and that was never who I wanted to be. And I loved the company and I loved all the people I worked with, but I just found myself being, just being in that grind. And when it became a grind, I felt like I was doing it for the money. For many years, I loved my job, I loved my colleagues, I loved everything, but it over time it just became an absolute grind. And I thought, I'm just doing this for the money. And so when I had an option to opt out, I took it because I knew I had lost a sense of self without the
Yeah.
job, and I wanted to reconnect and find that. And so I will say, to younger people, you do lose your way. You might have this vision of who you want to be and what you want to become. And sometimes life takes over. You get kids, you're married, you got a mortgage, you got car payments, you got college tuition, you got all this stuff weighing you down, and it's hard to lose, it's easy to lose sight of all of that. And so if you have the chance, it's important to reevaluate. And if you can make a change,
And in retirement, are you enjoying it, or is it a mix of good times, bad times, like the rest of life? Some people think it's a panacea. I was just curious.
yeah, it's funny. Before I retired, I thought it was that panacea. I thought it was going to be a decades long vacation. I thought my life was going to be perfect. And the irony is that even a vacation has a low point. I mean, every vacation you go on, there's travel delays or there's traffic if you're driving, or you get to the hotel or the Airbnb and it's not quite like the pictures. There's always ups and downs, in life. And I think it's the same is true of retirement. When I initially retired, I really struggled because I struggled with, my identity. I didn't have any structure. I didn't have a purpose to my
Mm.
days. I didn't have any hobbies. I mean, there were so many things that I hadn't thought about. I was always just focused on the financial aspect of preparing for retirement and not, the emotional or quote spiritual aspect of it. And that was a real miss on my part. And so it took me probably 14 or 15 months to settle in, because even my entire community and friend network was through my job. And so there was
Right.
many things that it just kind of smacked me in the face where I was like, okay, this is not what I thought, which is partly why I probably took the TikTok. But I did settle. Finally, I started meeting people and I gave myself some structure. I started getting up early and working out, and I had to create all that. But that process of feeling the loss of all the things that I lost in, by leaving and rebuilding all of that helped me to figure out who I am today and who I want to become. And so in the end, that was what I wanted. I wanted to redefine myself outside of a job. And so I've been able to do that, but it wasn't easy. Like life's not easy. It's like,
No, no, yeah. I think human beings actually move at a slower pace, and it's just events like this that help us to realize that.
yeah, that's true. And I think it's, there's your mind that thinks you're going to just go and have this, vacation, but then it's your heart and your spirit that are like, no, 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 we're not ready. Like we need to decompress. There's the logical and then there's the emotional. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
anyone that's thinking of retiring, or if they're recently retired, my advice would be to give yourself time, to give yourself at least a year, decompress, you know, start to figure out what brings you joy. And that's what I did. I started just to focus on, I mean, it seems ridiculous, this 50-year-old woman and 55 making TikToks. Like, who's going to watch them? But like, I had no end game. I didn't know why I was doing except that I enjoyed it. Like, I didn't want to
Yeah.
be selling things or all of this on TikTok, but I just did it because I enjoyed it, and it just sort of panned out.
And I
I'm very
think that comes across in your videos. They're very genuine and it's just you telling your story. And that's what makes the world go round is stories. Have there been any technological things that have really struck you or impacted you positively in your life?
I mean, probably like everyone else, the cell phone. I mean, I'm obviously, and computers and Zoom and all of this. But I remember being a kid, in the 1970s thinking, imagine you could talk to someone and see their face, like a video
Yeah.
telephone. Like, it was so far out there. And now it's just so commonplace. And just, the way we can stay connected and be connected with people, and just, the shop, just even shopping, just the access to information. I think that computers and cell phones all enabled, in building communities. In some ways it also breaks them down and silos them, but I think, to me, that's probably been the greatest change in my lifetime.
Oh, yeah. Video phone calls, and here we are.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. Do you have any things that you've learned that help you feel happy just from your experience through life? Any tips?
Yeah, it's funny. When I was young, I thought it was, the career and, you know, making money and all of this. And that obviously is important. But I think it's funny. I love my job until I lost my purpose with it. And so I think some of it is having purpose. I think some of it is relationships,
Mm,
having that trusting circle of friends, and having people that matter to you, and that you matter to them. I think can make, it's not everyone wants to make a lot of money and do all this stuff, but in the end, sometimes that leads to more unhappiness than having, because it can be very isolating. And I found that in my job, it can be very isolating. And, both my parents have passed away. And as my father said when he was dying, nobody gets out of here alive. And so we all come into this world and we all leave this world. And at the end of the day, you can't take it with you. And I saw that with my parents, when we had to move them, and you're just getting rid of all their belongings and possessions and photos. And it's really like, wanting to have people and community there that support you throughout your life, to me, is much more important and brings the happiness and the joy, than being, potentially very wealthy and alone,
yeah.
or just grinding it out so hard that you lose sight of your family.
I think that's beautiful advice. I love it because it's so real. It really does come down to that. And but we lose sight of it so often. So thanks for that, Jeannie. That's great, great thoughts. Looking back at your younger self, you're imagining video calls. Is there any advice you would have given your younger self what you know now? Any thoughts there?
I would say, definitely to trust your instincts.
Mm,
And I would say that relationships are hard work, um, and that they don't always come easy, but they're worth it. And I would say, it's not all about the money. It is about finding things that bring you joy. And if they can bring you money, even better. But I wouldn't just, whenever you get too siloed or you're focusing on one thing, you're saying yes to this one thing, whether it's work or your family, and then you're saying no to other things. And so
mm.
I do think that you just have to be cognizant, as if you're going to lean in and put all of your energy and all of your effort into this one avenue, just recognize what are the things that you're not paying attention to, and maybe you're okay with that. Maybe that's okay for a period of time. Over the long term, that may or may not be okay. But I do think it's really important to kind of take a look at the big picture and make sure that, where your energy goes, your heart goes, your spirit goes, and are you leaving anything behind?
Yeah, great
Today,
advice,
yeah.
Jeannie. It was lovely chatting with you, and I really appreciate you sharing your story with us here on Live.
Sure, anytime. Happy to be here, Sharon. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the video on the Life channel. Please subscribe, and if you're interested in participating, just click the link in the description below. Thank you.